the record. Erev Tov, and wherever you are, hope the weather is good, and it will be even gooder with the rain that's coming. We don't need a storm, but that's what's coming, it sounds like. Tonight's shiur is actually in the Ilu Nishmat, a woman named Batya Bat Sarah Avraham. She just passed away this afternoon. She's the mother of a coworker of mine, so I wanted to dedicate the shiur to her. Matter of fact, Levi is tonight. I'm not going to it, obviously, because I'm here, but it should be in her memory. Okay. So tonight I have a goal. The goal is to not confuse you. The goal is to get things moving, and we will start with this slide, which is called Anatomy of the Soul. It's a book by Rabbi Nachum of Breslov, but that's what we're in the process of doing. We started last week with Perek Gimel, and we are going to get into Perek Gimel and hopefully get a good ways into it. It's a relatively short chapter that, by the way, don't let any length of a chapter in Tanya fool you. There is no rhyme or reason to the relative ease of a chapter or not. You know, when you learn Gemara, for those of you who learn Gemara, you know, if you come across a daf of Gemara that has one line and there's Tosfot and Rashi, it's massive, you know you're in for trouble. It's, oh, it's only one line, big deal. Okay, but that's not how it works in Tanya. Just some are longer and some chapters are very long and some are short. This is a relatively short one, but again, we're building on different steps here. So what I want to do is get into the beginning of this chapter again. We read just the first few words. We saw a video last week from Rabbi Spalter. Once in a while, I'll pop him in. I will pop in Rabbi Moss, a British chap who has a amazing way of explaining. And at some point, I will introduce you to my Rav, so to speak, the one I adopted as my Rebbe for Tanya, Rabbi Silverberg, who is evidently very well known. I didn't know that before I started listening to him. So what I'm going to do is I want to read a few lines, translate it and explain. And once we get down to right around down here, where it says Ubiyo ha'inyan, the two dots, then from there I will do a little bit of more in-depth explanation. Okay, so beginning of chapter 3, Perek Gimel, make it even a little bit bigger. Come on. There we go. Perek Gimel, V'hine. Kol bechinat umadrega mishalosh elu, nefesh, ruach, uneshama, kilula me'eser bechinot keneget eser sfirot elionot, shenishtalshelu mehen anechlek nehen. Okay, so this is what we started with last week, and I'm going to clarify, and I'll show you a visual of it in a few minutes. We talked about the idea that when Hashem created the world, he created what were called the 10 emanations of the 10 sfirot. With those 10 sfirot, he created creation. Right now, just use that general term right now as 10 emanations, 10 sfirot, because what we're interested now in understanding is how does that relate to the neshama, so that these 10 sfirot of Hashem are replicated, so to speak, as they came down through the worlds and brought a neshama to each one of us. And each one of us has a neshama that's made up of these 10 different faculties, 10 different attributes.
So there's no one-to-one correspondence between the 10 sfirot and the 10 ma'amarim?
No, I shouldn't say no so fast. Right. So I'm not going to say no so fast. It'll be dealt with later on. Yeah, the concept of the 10 utterances that Hashem created with the creation, we'll see. I can't say it has zero connection. Of course, there's a connection, but we have to wait to see that. Okay, so again, just now we start off the basic fact that our neshama, which is made up of 3 parts in general, called the nefesh, ruach, and neshama, or naran for short, is made up of 10 faculties or attributes which mirror the 10 sfirot Hashem used to create the world and also to emanate into this world. Shehen, they are, mehen nechlakot l'shtayim. They are divided up into 2 different groups. Shehen, which are shalosh imot, the sheva kfulot. He says that the 10 emanations, the 10 faculties, the 10 bechinot in our neshama, the 10 parts, are subdivided into 2 other groups. And they are called the 3 mothers and the 7 doubles. This is where you go, what? The 3 mothers and the 7 doubles. So what does that mean? Perush. That means the first 3, what they're called the 3 imot, or the 3 mothers, are Chochma, Bina, V'Da'at. Again, that's Rashi Tevot that you're familiar with of Chabad, Chochma, Bina, and Da'at, which are our intellectual components within our neshama. V'Shiv'at Yemei Binyan, and the 7 days of creation, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet. That the first 3 of this 10 emanations are Chochma, Bina, and Dat, and the 7 Kfulot, which I'll explain in a minute, the 7 doubles are the 7 days of creation, known as Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, and the other names in the 10 Sfirot. The Chach ben Nefesh Adam, so too, in the person's neshama, Shenechleket l'shtayim Sechel Umidok. Hashem divided our neshama into 2 sections. Sechel, which are the first 3, Chochma, Bina, and Da'at, and Midot are, let's just use the term right now, character traits. Okay, so what's going on here? Let me read 3 more lines to get to the 2 dots, and I will show you a visual of what we're talking about. Hasechel, our intellect, Kolel Chochma, Bina, V'Da'at. Our intellect composes 3 parts that are called the Chochma, Bina, and Da'at. I'm just going to loosely translate those as different forms of intellect, although it's obviously much more than that. The Hamidot, the other part, the other 7, remember, you divided the neshama into 2 parts. There's the 3 mothers, the 7 doubles, forget what that means for a moment. The 3 mothers, or the intellect, is made up of Chochma, Bina, and Da'at. And the Midot, the other section, is of 7 parts. Hein Ahavat Hashem, Upachado, Virato, Ulefaro, V'chulei. They're made up of 7 other terms of emotion. V'chochma, Bina, V'Da'at nikru imot. The 3 levels of intellect are called the 3 mothers. Umakor lemidot, and they are the source of our character traits and the source of our various faculties. Ki hamidot toladot Chabad, because the midot are the derivatives of Chabad. Okay, lots and lots and lots of stuff to unpack here, as they say. Let's take a look here. Let me make this smaller. Put you up there. Yes, there is going to be a diagram right now to answer your question, Dave. It's not as much of a diagram as it will be a, first just, we have to take a look at this. Okay. The 10 Sfirot, when Hashem initially creates the universe, in order to do so, Hashem has what we call as just in English, emanations or Sfirot, that were used to bring the world into existence. They're known as the 10 Sfirot, Chochma, Bina, V'Da'at, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut. And again, I mentioned last week that many of you will come into contact with those terminologies in one of 2 ways. Assuming you are not davening Nusach Adot Mizrach, you will come across it mostly during Sfirat HaOmer. So when you finish saying the day of the number, very often you'll see a Hod Shebe Chesed, Hod Shebe Gvura, Tiferet Shebe Netzach. These permutations of these different emanations. The reason I say if you're not davening, because in Adot Mizrach there's Patach Eliyahu, which is an introductory paragraph said before Shacharit and Mincha by many, but it makes reference to these emanations within there. Now, what does this do for us? Let's take a look at this chart that it took me a few minutes to figure out how to make. Okay. I'm going to understand some terminology. Let's try and get our head wrapped around what he's talking about. Right now, what I want you to take a look at is the top half. The first 3 sections, the first 3 words, Chochma, Bina, V'Da'at, those 3 things are known as Chabad, represent our intellectual capacity. They're referred to by the Admor HaZaken as the imot, the mothers. We'll see in a second why. The 7 other attributes are known as the doubles. That's the bottom here. And these are emotions. So the top half, these three, are the intellect. The bottom 7 are emotions. He says the reason that these words, chokhmah, binah, and dat, are called the mothers is because they, quote, give birth to our emotions. Meaning,
Excuse me, but
wait,
isn't mothers a mistranslation? Because the plural of mothers in Hebrew is imahot.
Thank you.
Amot can be either a plural of amat, which is either a unit of measurement or a forearm, like in Bitjabat Parosh or Chait Amata.
So take it up. You have to take that up with the Alter Rebbe.
Okay.
Yes.
But I mean,
okay. So the emot. So the three.
There's
emotes,
any evidence that he meant mothers and not imahot?
If you continue reading in the next few lines when we get to it, the three emot are chokhmah, binah, and dat, because they give birth, so to speak, to the emotional aspect that we have. Now, why are the emotional aspects referred to as kfulot or doubles? One of the things that bothers some of you when we first began the book was that he seemingly referred to certain aspects of our being as just one unidirectional. For example, actually, let me change the way I'm going to start that sentence. Is anger good? Is passion good? Is being idle, I-D-L-E, not I-D-O-L, is that good? All of our emotions have a dual aspect to them. All of our emotions can be used in different ways, just like fire, just like water, just like earth, just like almost anything that's out there can in fact be used in different ways. So therefore, the emotions that are given birth to, and forget what each one of these individually means at the moment, have dual aspects to them. Because they are brought into existence through the intellect, and they're brought into, I'm going to ask everyone to please make sure you're on mute, so that you are bringing about these emotions into existence through these. He uses the term as mothers. What I want to do is take this off of screen share for a minute and spend a couple minutes talking now about this idea of, before we go any further, of chokhmah, binah, and dat. Let me just make myself set up here, keep you on top, minimize. Oh, that's right. Okay, I forgot.
It's interesting. So, Rav Chanel, it's interesting that they come under the category of mothers or under the title mothers.
As opposed to fathers.
Other than the giving birth, but it's usually the mothers are more associated with the emotions and the fathers more with the intellect, especially in those days.
Interesting you say that. So you're going to have to hang on. We're going to see he's going to make reference both to emot and avot. Okay, we'll see.
Okay.
Very, very good. Let's see this. Yes, someone has pointed out the grammar has changed over centuries. That is correct. Okay, very good. Okay.
That I know very well, having been married to an employee of the Hebrew Language Academy for 28 years. And she.
Okay, now, chokhmah. I want to talk about chokhmah, binah, and dat so we understand what they mean before we go any further. So far, what we've done is to lay out the concept of the existence of 10 parts to our neshama. The first 3 are the intellect, chokhmah, binah, dat, and the next 7 are the emotional aspects. We also said that the chokhmah, binah, and dat, intellect, lead us to the emotional aspect, which he is going to expand upon when we look at the text again in a minute. But let's first understand what those 3 words mean, because chokhmah, binah, and dat are going to be used many, many, many times, obviously, throughout this book. So what are they? Because we tend to use them somewhat interchangeably or sometimes just generically, like chokhmah, intellect. Chokhmah, as is described in Tanya, means that first flash of intellect. It's the point where you have this idea. It pops in, it's like this flash almost of an illumination. It pops into your head that the you don't know where you're going with it. You don't know the details of it. You don't know anything yet, but you just have this flash of an idea. It kind of is like almost intuition, that you're starting down a certain path of certain reasoning, but you're not yet aware of where you're going with it. You're not yet aware of any ramifications. You don't even have an adequate solution to a problem you might be dealing with. Then comes Bina. Bina means understanding. What does that mean? It's a point where you start to crystallize the idea, when you start to take that which was obscure in Chokhmah and go to the next level of Bina. Bina is the concept of Mevin Davar Mitoch Davar, to understand one thing or to deduce something out of another matter. So you start out with this flash of an idea. That's the Chokhmah. It has no shape or form, so to speak, yet. When you start to crystallize that idea and do something with it, that becomes the Bina, the deeper, the understanding of it. And then once you fully understand and you unify that, it becomes a part of you and you put it into practice, meaning if you understand that the idea you've come to is desirable, you attach yourself to it, you make it part of you, and you take action on it. If you see it as harmful or something not useful, you discard it, you run away from it. That faculty of being able to attach yourself to it, to immerse yourself, and to really to know that in true sense, that's da'at. So what does da'at mean? We know that it says in Sefer Bereshit many times, vayeda, or vayad yada, like Adam yada et Chava ishto. What does that mean? Adam knew his wife. So we know that means that they formed a union, and then they had a child. She became pregnant from that. But what does that mean? It means to know, right? It says, and Adam knew his wife, Eve. Yeah, Eve, nice to meet you. I'm Adam. How you doing, right? That's not what it means. It's the concept of connection and attachment and union. When you move from Chokhmah, Bina, to Da'at, from Chokhmah to Bina to Da'at, you've taken something abstract, you've done something where you've understood it deeper, and then you've made it a part of you, connected to it, it made it yours. That's the idea of Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at. Now take a look at the text. I'm going to go back to that, to the text. Bring it here. Move up. Okay. Let me share my screen with you. For those of you who don't have it, you'll rely on this. Okay. There's two words on the other page that I'm not, you just have to take my word for it, where it says, Ubiur ha'inyan, that's on the other page. Ubiur ha'inyan. Ki nehasechel shebanefesh hamaskel, shu hamaskil kol davar, nikra b'shem chokhmah, koach ma. So now he's going to now explain to us, what is this chokhmah? I gave you a general idea of what the Tanya is going to tell us, but now he's going to tell us, obviously in much better words than me. The nefesh hamaskel, that's our intellectual nefesh. What does that mean? It is the part of us that, in fact, please enlarge text. I shall do that now. Thank you. I try to look at the chat in the middle so I can make sure that everyone, if there's a question, but here's, okay, to make it bigger. Okay. He explains to us that the concept of chokhmah is this, as I said to you, this flash of intellect. What is chokhmah? When you rearrange the letters, you get koach ma. The power of what? What does that actually mean? It's the power of, what is that? There's koach. Remember, there's two words in Hebrew that are koach and poal. Koach is the potential. Besides meaning power, it's also potential. And poal is the action. So you say, poal means to take something from potential to action. So chokhmah is the, I wonder what that is kind of thought. Now, sometimes that's fleeting. For example, you're traveling down the road and a car swerves in front of you. You don't go, I wonder what that is. I wonder what's going to happen. Now, you instantly know what you need to do. Your brain goes from chokhmah to bina to da'at almost instantly, because you need to. But sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes it works in a much slower pace. So that's chokhmah, is koach ma, the power of the what, in a sense. Like it's an idea. It's an undefined idea. It's a thought. Uchishemotzi kocho el hapoal. When you then take that potential idea and you bring it to fruition, so to speak, then I've turned my page. Shemitbonem besichlo. You think about it. You contemplate it in your intellect. Lavin davar leishuro uleomko, to understand it, both its depth and its breadth. It's actually backwards, but no, it's to all different fast directions. In other words, you have taken that idea, you've taken it from this kernel of a what is this to understanding its depth and breadth. Mitoch eze davar chokhma hamuskal besichlo nikra bina. That next step, where you've gone from koach ma, or the chokhmah of what is it, to the taking it to your brain, to think about it, to intuit, to figure out one thing from another. That step is called bina. Vehen hem av ve'em hamolidot. And those two actions together, well, we're going to get to da'at in a minute. Those two actions together are the father and mother that give birth to ahavat Hashem, v'yirato ufachado, to the love of Hashem, the awe of Hashem, and the fear of Hashem. Understand what he just now said. This is going to become a major, major fundamental principle we're going to see expanded on much later. That what brings us to ahavat Hashem and yirat Hashem is chokhmah and bina. We cannot get to ahavat Hashem, nor can we get to yirat Hashem without chokhmah and bina. If you tell a child who's 2 years old, Hashem is fantastic, Hashem is great, we get everything from Hashem, they do not yet have the mental capacity to have true, the normal child, to have true ahavat Hashem and yirat Hashem at that point. They may have chokhmah, they do have bina, but it's not developed to that point that it can lead them to this. We will see why this is such a critical piece of information. Imagine for a moment I told you that I need to go tomorrow to Eilat, and I have a car, which I don't, but this is Pretendville right now. I need to go to Eilat tomorrow. So one of those things I will need to make sure before I leave is not only that I have my coffee, and not only that I have plugged into Waze where I'm going, but I also have to have gasoline in the car, or I have to petrol, depending where you come from. Now, without the gasoline in the car, I'm not going anywhere, correct? I can want to go, I can want to go, I can want to go, I can have everything. I have the tires are at the right PSI and Waze is all set to go, but if I don't have gasoline, I'm not going anywhere. So that gasoline feeds the engine that allows me to go. What feeds our engine of ahavat Hashem and yirat Hashem? That's the chokhmah and the bina. Again, we're going to get to that in a moment. So that's why the Alter Rebbe, the Admor Zaken, refers to chokhmah, bina, and da'at as a set, as the imot. And this time he calls it the av and the aim, just the chokhmah and bina. He acts as if they are the mother and the father, giving birth, as it were, to ahavat Hashem and yirat Hashem. Ki hasechel shebenefesh hamaskelet, because the sechel, our intellect, in our intellectual neshama, kishamitbonenu ma'amik me'od, when we think and when we contemplate deeply, bigdulat Hashem, what does it do for us? Okay, now before I read the next 3 lines, a little introduction. We have all at one point or another stood in awe of God. It could be something physical. You saw the beautiful mountain, a mountain range. You saw the Grand Canyon. You saw someone get saved by a miracle, that they got pulled out of the way of the speeding car, whatever it might be. We've all witnessed somehow or another in our lives, and hopefully many, many, many times, the idea of Marabu Ma'asech Hashem, the idea of how great his works are, and we stand in awe of God. David HaMelech tells us one of the best ways to do that: stand outside at night and look up at the stars and the moon and ask yourselves, who created all these things, to see where we are holding in this universe. One way or another, we have different approaches of how we connect to the grandiosity of Hashem. And he says that when we use our intellect, let's go back again before I read the next 3 lines. When we use that intellect, sechel, when we use our intellect, when we use our use bina to get into the depths of the greatness of God, and what is it we might be contemplating? I'm going to read 3 concepts to you, and they are as follows. Number 1, echu memale kol almin, how God fills all universe, visovev kol almin, and how he encompasses all the worlds. I have to explain these, obviously. The chula kame kilachashiv, that everything next to God is as if it's insignificant. If you contemplate those ideas, which I'll explain in a moment, nolda v'nitorara midat yirat haromemut b'mocho u'v'machshavto. You awaken, you give birth to, in your mind, a midah of yirah haromemut, which literally means being in awe of the magisterial existence of Hashem. This happens in your mind and in your thought process. Lira, to be in fear and awe. Ulahit boshesh, and to be embarrassed. And it doesn't mean to be embarrassed. Well, it does, but I'll explain later. Boshesh migdulato yitbarach, to be embarrassed in front of his magisterial grandiosity. She'ein la sof v'tachlit, that is infinite. Upachad Hashem b'libo, and the fear of Hashem will be in his heart. The shuv yitlahev libo bi'ahava azah krishpe esh. I don't want to go any further. No. Before I go any further, what is he now telling us? He says that when you think about these 3 concepts, now how do we get to this? We started off that we have the intellect, chokhmah bina dat. It gives birth to these emotions. What is going on when we use these intellectual capacities? It gives birth to these emotions. And what is it that fuels this idea? What should we be thinking and contemplating that gets us to that point? Is these 3 concepts here. Let's move you over here. And move up to here. Okay. These 3 concepts, I'm only going to mention them briefly because he will get into them much more later on. The first 2 sound contradictory. Number 1 is literally means the Hashem fills everything in the universe. Hashem is, we say Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is everywhere, up, down, right? Up, right and left, all around. We all learned the nice Uncle Moishi song. I think it's his. That Hashem is everywhere. In addition to that, he is sovev kol almin. He also he encircles all worlds. Well, wait a minute. If Hashem is everywhere, in other words, if I have this, I can't see myself. Wait, I need to move myself into the screen. Here. If I have this mouse and I say Hashem is, so to speak, in the mouse, is everywhere, every single atom inside this mouse, and then I also say that Hashem encircles the mouse, well, which is it? Is it around? Is it in? So again, that's something we'll come to later. And kula kame kilachashiv, that next to God, everything is insignificant. It's not like you're comparing apples to oranges. You're comparing apples to something you can't even describe. When you use these tools, when he's going to describe this much more in depth at a later time, you then are able to give birth, as it were, in your mind to this idea of the love for Hashem, for the fear of Hashem, the awe of Hashem, etc. Let's go back now. And what else? So that's one of these 3 concepts that we just now learned. Memale kol alamin, savev kol alamin, and kula chashiv. Nothing is. Everything is like nothing next to God. Those all are born out of the chokhmah and bina. What does this mean? Lehitboshesh migdulato yitbarach. When let me back up. There's a very famous story in the Gemara about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He's one of my all-time heroes, by the way, in Jewish history, which Bezrat Hashem, when I start teaching a Jewish history class, which I hope to do down the road, that I will use that as a starting point. We'll use the idea of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who he was. Anyways, there's a story in the Gemara that tells us as follows. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was ill. He was dying. And his students came into him. And among other things, the conversation turns and they say to him, Rabbeinu Barchenu. They ask their Rebbe, they want a bracha. They know he's dying. They want a bracha. And he says to them, Yehimora shamayim alechem, k'mora basar v'adam. May the fear of God be upon you like the fear of man. And they say, Ad kan. The big Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, that's the bracha. That's it, that we should fear Hashem like we fear man. And he responded by saying, halavai, if only. He says, when a person is about to break in and steal something, they don't say, I hope God doesn't see me. They say, I hope so-and-so doesn't see me. They're afraid of man, but they're not afraid of God. And if they would realize that Hashem is in everywhere, and Hashem encircles everything, and that everything next to God is absolutely nothing, and they would realize that, they would stand before God in complete and utter embarrassment and feel like, oh my gosh, how can I even do something like that? Now, wait a minute. I mentioned to you in the introduction to the book that he spends no less than, I think it's 6 chapters or 8 chapters. I'm probably wrong on the number, but it's a lot, on the topic of simcha, of joy. Well, this doesn't sound very joyous. That when you think about Hashem in this way, like, oh, you feel like you're a flea, you're a nothingness, and like, how does that engender happiness? You're gonna have to hold on for that. But I mention it because it's important bit of foreshadowing for what's coming down the road. We take a look at the next couple lines. A lot of what he's doing in this chapter, by the way, is bringing in concepts that he's going to expand upon. Remember, I told you that 3, 4, and 5 is just the anatomy of the soul. Let's say, for example, lahavdil elef alfei avdalos. You buy something from IKEA and you open it up, and it says you're supposed to have six nuts and 3 screws and 14 of this rod and that. Okay, all you're doing is unpacking right now. You're looking at all the parts. You don't know what this nut or this bolt is supposed to do yet. We're learning right now. So let's see what else he tells us. When we, in fact, feel this idea, or our intellect gives us these things to deal with, Vishuv, I'm over here right now. Vishuv yitlahev libo bi'ahava azah. He will be consumed almost with this very strong love for Hashem. Kirishpe esh, bechashika, bechafitza. But a person will be almost consumed with this burning desire for Hashem, b'tshuka, v'nefesh shokeka legdulat ein sof baruch hu. To want to be with that Hashem, that is the Ein Sof, the infinite God. The kilota nefesh. It's almost to the point of being subsumed, like you to give up your whole neshama to Hashem. What's his point here? What's he saying before I go any further? It sounds kind of strange. He said that your love can be primed to such an extent that all you're going to want is to be completely subsumed into God. That's a strange kind of love, no? Sounds strange. And is it, let me ask you, and this is a rhetorical question. I don't want you to answer this one. Sometimes I do. What would be a better love? Azah karishpe esh, where a person is consumed with a burning, passionate love of God, or something a little bit more calm? Most people would say, what are you talking about? A passionate love shows something very strong. We're going to see about that, maybe not. So on the one hand, you have ish. You have this concept of fire burning in you for passion, desire for God. On the other hand, it also says, hidichtiv, as it says, nichsefa v'gam kalata nafshi. What is another pasuk? Uchtiv tzama nafshi le'elokim. Uchtiv tzama lecha nafshi. All these psukim, I'm not going to translate them at the moment. We're going to come back to them multiple times. All of them have this idea of thirsting for Hashem. And this thirst for God comes from, is sourced in the foundation, the whatever the word is, of fire that burns in our neshama elokit. Remember, we're talking about the nefesh elokit in these three chapters. Okay, so let me stop share. Let's do a little review. I'm not going to go any further. Okay, I'll tell you why. We only have a little bit left in this chapter, but I want to tell you what's coming up before we read it. We mentioned so far the bina, the chokhmah, and the bina. Right? We said the chokhmah was this flash of intellect. The bina was where we made vin davar bitoch davar. I already mentioned to you, he didn't tell us yet, but I already told you the dot is the connection. So what he's telling us now is that the chokhmah and bina give birth to all these emotions of ahavat Hashem, yirat Hashem, the awe of God, pachad, being in fear of God, and everything else that goes with it, to the point of almost being this burning desire to be with God. It's almost this desire of this constant thirst and yearning for Hashem. That when you that point, when you connect to Hashem, it doesn't have to be to that point of extreme, but to any point when you make that connection, that's the da'at. That's the connection that you make between you and Hashem. Without it, there's a disconnect. What does that all mean? Again, this will become much clearer as we move into future chapters. But because this is just his foundation and his introduction. When one takes those, let's go back to the slide. Now I can show you again on the slide, make it a little bit clearer. A little, make it smaller. Okay. When we go from and use our chokhmah and bina, in the beginning he said chokhmah, bina, and da'at, the chabad, are the emot, right, that give birth to these. Now he's telling us another step, that the chokhmah and bina are the mother and the father that give birth to these. And how do we connect to these? That connection is the da'at. That's where we connect. When you start feeling, when you have a feeling one day, like, this is like unbelievable, I just love Hashem, or, oh boy, I better be careful because I don't want this to happen. I want to get in trouble with Hashem, which is also a step. All these feelings you have of this connection to Hashem, all these emotions which were born out through Chokhmah Binah, that's how you connect to Hashem. That's the dot. If we say, I believe in Hashem, that's something. But the Rambam actually says two things. He says we have a chiyuv laha'amin v'lada'at. What does that mean? So on the simple level, it means I don't have to just believe, but according to the Rambam, and those of you who are in the Kuzari class know there are multiple opinions on this, whether we have a requirement to delve into philosophy and try to understand to the best of our abilities to understand God or not. The Rambam says we have to lahamin and ladat. We have to believe, but we also have to know. What does it mean? So on the simplistic level, it means we have to do our own investigation and prove to ourselves Ki'ilu Hashem exists. But it's even more than that when we use the translation or the explanation of the Admor HaZaken. Ladat means to connect. It means to be in union with it. It means to make that connection, just like the concept of Adam Yada El Chava Ishto. It doesn't mean he knew her, but he means he connected to her spiritually, physically, emotionally. Two people are sitting on a bus next to each other, right? And they're both learning Daf Yomi, let's say. Stam, they're learning Daf Yomi, two people are learning Parshat Shavua, or two people are saying the same Parak Tehillim. They're going next to each other. What is the connection between them? The connection between them, they happen to be learning the same thing. But what happens when one happens to notice the other's learning the exact same item? So what do? They start a conversation. People didn't know each other 2 seconds ago. What brought them together? The Chokhmah and Binah led to this emotional connection that they can share the same Torah. And what's that Torah? What is Torah? Torah is Hashem. So when we use the Chokhmah and Binah, we use that to bring our da'at to fruition, so to speak, to bring that connection and give birth all that together to all of those emotions. Bezrat Hashem, next week on Tuesday, what we'll do, we'll more than likely finish this chapter. We'll wrap up this first section of this first of the 3 chapters. I'll give a little review, hopefully also. But it's important to make sure that this one slide, again, go back to that, stays in your brains, okay? Because this is going to be really important to understand. This division, and by the way, this division appears not only the nefesh ha'elokit, but it will also be replicated in nefesh ha'behamit. We will see that after the first 3 chapters of Gimel, Dalet, and Hey. We will see this again, Vav, Zayin, and Chet. Okay. So in the meantime, I hope I have not overloaded your brains. I hope that it's made sense. And Bezrat Hashem, we will pick it up next week on Tuesday night. Hope you all have a good evening. Stay healthy and safe.
Yeshua, just one quick question. When you said that Chokhmah and Dat were the mother and the father, was that respectively or irrespectively? Because Binah is usually connected with a woman, not the father.
No, what you're talking about, Binah connected to a woman, is where it's all is sourced in. First of all, it says that 10 levels of Binah came down to the world, 9 to women and 1 to men, which we call in English, you saw women's intuition. That's based on the fact that the Gemara tells us that Hashem says, Vayiven et Hatzela. He took the built woman, that from the Bet Nun Hey being the shosh of Binah, Bet Nun Hey being the shosh of Livnot. So the woman was given this extra 9 times more.
Vayiven ha'isha val vayitzer et ha'adam.
Right. Right.
So,
but that's what you're talking about. It's not that the Binah is necessarily a woman's thing, only, but it's the.
But I'm asking if the Admor said that the Chokhmah was the father or the mother, and the Dat was the mother or the father, or vice versa.
So he said it like this: if you go by the so it's a good question. If you go by the order of the words, what he said was Chokhmah and Binah, Av, Em. So it would correlate to what you're saying.
Respectively, like this.
Right, it would. I mean, I'm not saying that is what his intention is. I'd have to look at that. Of Em. Rav Steinsaltz seems to say that also. So, okay.
Strange.
Okay. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Be well.